Welcome back to our week 2 of the Advent series. I'm here with Dennis Darville, and we are excited to continue looking into Rebecca McLaughlin's book, Is Christmas Unbelievable? And week 2, Dennis, we're going to talk about, can we take the gospel seriously? And as we mentioned last week, this is kind of the chapter that you've been spending some time in. And what are some of your takeaways from what you're learning from this little booklet?
Yeah, Tracy, good to see you again. Thanks. And welcome to all our Links family out there. Hope you're enjoying this series again. Tracy and I both commend this book highly. Short book, 4 chapters, takes a lot of very serious material and distills it down into accessible material. Really, it's an apologetics book. Apologetics, defending the faith, which more popularly could be said, knowing what you believe and why you believe it. And last week, Tracy, as we looked at the chapter you spent most of your time in, chapter 1, is Jesus a real person? I thought she just did a brilliant job of making her case that Jesus is historically real, largely by appealing to non-Christian writers, both ancient and modern. Chapter 2, she's essentially drilling down on the issue of, are the Gospels reliable? While it's true that we have non-Christian writers, atheists, skeptics, agnostics, verifying that Jesus is real, those same men and women, many of which through the years have denied the historical reliability of the 4 Gospels and the book of Acts. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I don't know of any other ancient writings that have come under more scrutiny and investigation by scholars. And because the attempt, as you well know, Tracy, the attempt is largely, hey, okay, so we have to admit that Jesus was real, but what we don't have to admit is that the Gospels, the 4 Gospels, are actually reliable documents. And the arguments against these documents are pretty amazing. And I'll tell you, let's just take one example. I mean, she covers a lot of ground in this chapter, but one example would be simply the manuscript evidence. Manuscript evidence, Matthew wrote, Mark wrote. Mark's gospel, if people don't know this, Mark's gospel is actually Peter's. Mark was Peter's amanuensis. Mark was his secretary. So this is Peter's gospel. And one of the things she does is the Gospels are being written by eyewitness testimonies. These are people who walked with Jesus, knew Jesus, saw his crucifixion, burial, resurrection, and then gave an account to it. She often, actually in the chapter, also alludes to a scholar named Richard Bauckham. And Bauckham's written a groundbreaking book, The Gospel and the Eyewitnesses. And essentially, he makes the case, convincingly so, cogently so, that the Gospels were written within 30 to 60 years of the lifetime of the apostles. And they were written largely by appealing to eyewitnesses. Luke begins his Gospel by talking about, I interviewed all these eyewitnesses to these accounts. And Richard Bauckham's argument was they wrote them so that everybody in the first century could say, oh, Mary Magdalene's still living. If you don't believe me, go ask her. In other words, this wasn't done in a corner somewhere. The second thing I think she did a great job on is just alluding to the manuscript evidence, as I mentioned just a minute ago. So, for instance, in ancient writings, when you're doing textual criticism or you're looking back to verify whether something actually happened, like, Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon in, AD or, 33 BC or whenever it happened, or, Alexander the Great conquering the world in such and such a year. Usually the manuscript evidence, they have like 10 copies. 10 copies. The writings of Plato describing Socrates, we have 1 copy. New Testament evidence, 5,500 manuscripts in Greek, not to mention thousands of others in Latin. The manuscript evidence for the veracity of the Gospels is overwhelming. So, among other things, archaeological appeals, and she just does an extraordinary job.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dennis. And you say the word eyewitness, and if we think about our golf games, the one thing that we kind of can equate that to is like a hole-in-one is not a hole-in-one unless there's an eyewitness.
Yeah.
But I've had 7 and they've all been witnessed, so I'm going to claim all 7.
Yeah, that's a way to tie it in right there. I had just on that note for fun, I'm 65 on my 40th birthday, so 25 years ago. I was playing golf with my dad and his attorney on our home course back in Mississippi, and I jarred a 7-iron. But I was in a 25-year slump on having a hole-in-one. I just didn't understand. Of course, I hadn't played that much over 25, but I still was in a slump, right? Until Labor Day weekend, I was playing with my son-in-law, and my 9-year-old grandson. And I had my next hole-in-one, and the joy of it was my grandson got to watch it.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot of more great information in this little chapter 2 of Rebecca's book, and we hope that you will find the book. We'll put some information on the website about that. Enjoy the PDF for your Links Fellowship studies, and we look forward to having you back for next week number 3 of our Advent series.
Goodbye, everybody.
Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her